Today, we're diving deep into Afghanistan. Now, I know what you're thinking, a land defined by conflict. But what if that's just the surface story? What if, hidden in its mountains and deserts, are secrets that could literally rewrite everything we think we know about human history? We're talking creatures of myth and maybe even technology from a lost age.
Yeah, just forget the geopolitics for a minute, forget the recent history, because we're about to explore a story that, if even a tiny piece of it is true, well, it changes the game completely.
We've all heard that nickname, right? The graveyard of empires. But what if the reason so many world powers have failed there isn't just about tactics or terrain? What if it's about what the land itself is protecting? That's the huge question we're digging into today.
Okay, so let's start with what we know for sure. Afghanistan is notoriously, almost impossibly, to conquer. But some accounts suggest there's a reason for that. A really ancient and almost unbelievable reason that goes way beyond modern warfare.
Every single one of them faced incredible resistance, no doubt about it. But according to some whispers, some stories from soldiers on the ground, some of that resistance wasn't entirely human. And that brings us to a really shocking incident from our own time.
See, this reputation for the strange and the unexplained isn't just some dusty old legend. It leads us straight to a very specific, totally jaw-dropping event that was reported by US military personnel not that long ago, back in the early 2000s.
So, picture this. It's 2002. A routine US patrol just goes silent. Radio contact completely gone. A special ops team gets sent in to find them, and they track them to a remote mountain region. All they find is some scattered gear and the entrance to a massive cave. And then, from out of that darkness, something came out.
The details from the soldiers' alleged accounts are just insane. This wasn't just some big guy. They described a literal giant, something straight out of mythology. We're talking nearly 15 feet tall, with fiery red hair, 6 fingers on each hand. And get this, a double row of teeth. It was an impossible creature, and it was ready to fight. So all hell breaks loose. The soldiers open fire. The fight was apparently really short, but unbelievably brutal. The giant was incredibly fast and actually managed to kill one of the soldiers with its spear before they finally took it down. And almost the second it hit the ground, the cover-up began. The story goes that the surviving soldiers were forced to sign NDAs. Their official reports were completely rewritten to erase the incident. Now, the story probably would have died right there, but it didn't, because of a pilot. An AC-130 transport pilot later came forward and said he flew a massive unclassified pallet out of Kandahar. The body on it was so huge its feet were sticking out, and the smell was apparently awful. And its final destination? Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, a place that, let's be honest, is legendary for hiding secrets.
I know what you're thinking. This sounds like a totally wild conspiracy theory, right? But it does raise a pretty important question. If a creature like this was actually discovered, why in the world would you hide it?
I mean, seriously, why not share a discovery that would change human history forever? Why wouldn't that be the biggest news story of all time? Well, the theories behind the secrecy are honestly just as fascinating as the encounter itself.
It seems to come down to one word: control. First, geopolitical control. Can you imagine getting your hands on giant DNA? The potential for super soldier programs would be irresistible. Second, societal control. Finding out giants are real could cause absolute mass panic. And third, and maybe most important, narrative control. The existence of giants would blow a huge hole in evolutionary theory, while at the same time validating some of the oldest religious stories on Earth.
And here's the thing. This idea of giants isn't some new fringe concept. It's woven deep into the fabric of our oldest and most sacred texts. The Quran talks about the powerful Ad people. The Bible, of course, has the famous story of David and Goliath. And the Torah describes whole tribes of giants, the Anakim and Rephaim, who were supposedly so huge they made normal people feel like grasshoppers. So suddenly the Kandahar story feels less like a modern fantasy and more like an ancient story coming back to life.
Okay, so it's not just giant creatures that seem to haunt this landscape. The land itself, it feels like it holds on to the echoes of its incredibly violent past, creating paranormal hotspots that have even been documented in modern military reports.
Let me give you 2 really creepy examples. On the left, you've got Observation Post Rock. It was a US base built on a hill that, whoops, turned out to be a mass grave full of ancient bones. Soldiers there reported hearing phantom gunfire, disembodied whispers in Russian, and seeing shadows move on their own. And on the right, the ruins of a place called Shar-e-Golgola, which literally means the City of Screams. It was completely wiped out by Genghis Khan, and to this day, people who visit claim they can still hear the screams of the dead and the clash of swords in the wind.
So we've covered giants and we've covered ghosts. But this last part, this is where things go from strange to straight-up science fiction. Some people believe Afghanistan is hiding evidence of a lost, highly advanced civilization.
Yeah, we're moving beyond ancient biology now and into ancient technology. The focus shifts to these colossal monuments and structures that just don't have an easy modern explanation.
I mean, there's a rock formation that some people call the Afghan Sphinx. A Chinese traveler way back in the 7th century wrote about seeing a reclining Buddha statue that was nearly 1,000 feet long. That's huge! And today, it's just gone. But the most interesting of all these places might be a site called Takht Rustam.
Okay, before we get to the site, you need to know about something called a Vimana. In ancient Hindu texts like the Mahabharata, they're described as these mythical flying palaces or chariots. But here's the question, what if they weren't myths? What if they were actual, physical aircraft from a civilization that we've completely forgotten?
And that brings us right back to Takht Rustam. So the official story is that it's a 5th century Buddhist monastery carved out of the rock. But its really bizarre, dome-like structure has led to this incredible theory. What if it wasn't a monastery at all? What if it was a hangar?
This is where the conspiracy theories really take off. Some people online claim the site has what they call a time well, like a vortex of strange energy. There are even stories about US soldiers just vanishing after going inside. The whole thing went nuts when some world leaders made these sudden, unexplained visits to Afghanistan, and theorists claimed they were there to secretly inspect the source of this energy, an ancient Vimana, hidden and protected deep inside the mountain.
Now look, there is zero hard proof for any of this, but the local mythology, it adds one last, absolutely stunning twist that brings our whole story full circle. After its Buddhist history was forgotten, the locals renamed the site Takht Rustam, the throne of Rostam. And Rostam, the greatest hero in all of Persian mythology, was famous for one thing above all else. He was a slayer of giants.
So, at the end of the day, we're left with this question. Do we really know what Afghanistan is? Is it just the war-torn country we see on the news? Or is that just the latest chapter in a much older, much stranger, and far more important story? A story of giants, ghosts, and lost technology still waiting to be rediscovered in those mountains.
That's all for today. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Goodbye and have a great day.